All right, wrestling aficionados, gather round and prepare for a wild ride to the chaotic, dysfunctional world of AEW Dynamite from March 5th, the go-home show to their Revolution pay-per-view. If you thought you were tuning into a wrestling program and not some half-baked circus act, well, buckle up, because you're in for a bumpy ride. First off, let's set the stage. AEW was in Sacramento tonight, and while they managed to sell around 2,800 out of 2,900 tickets, pretty decent. I'll give them that. It still feels like they're trying to pass off a local high school gym as Madison Square Garden. But hey, at least it looked crowded. Nothing screams, we're a legitimate wrestling promotion, like putting on shows in smaller venues, so you can trick the audience into thinking your roster is packed to the rafters. Now, on to the meat and potatoes of this review. AEW had a mountain of challenges to tackle tonight. They needed to promote their pay-per-view like a used car salesman at a clearance lot, especially since WWE just pulled a massive headline with John Cena turning heel. That's the hot gossip everyone's buzzing about, and AEW's got to step up if they want to capture any of that attention. They've got Revolution looming. A Saturday Collision showed a hype and an urgent need to build new stars. But what do we get instead? A show that felt like it was thrown together by a bunch of caffeinated squirrels on a sugar high. Let's dive into the formatting, or should I say the lack thereof? This show was a glorious mess, like a dog's breakfast on a Sunday morning. People are talking about how AEW doesn't seem to have production meetings where they can actually plan their segments, and it shows. It's like they just tossed a bunch of ideas in the air and hope for the best. Take the opening segment, Ricochet and Swerve Strickland having a meeting. Sure, I can roll with that. It's a fresh approach, and every show can't start with a Will Ospreay match. But then we get into the real clusterfuck of the evening. Renee Paquette, bless her heart, is a great interviewer, but she's popping up in multiple segments like she's got a teleportation device. 1 minute she's about to be run over by a car with MJF, and 20 minutes later, she's backstage with Tony Storm and Mariah May thinking they're in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane or Sunset Boulevard Gone to Hell. This is why WWE has multiple interviewers. Folks, it prevents the audience from feeling like they're stuck in a time loop. And can we please talk about the overruns? I'm sick and tired of this nonsense. Just because your main event is heating up doesn't mean you can stretch it out like a G-string on the brink of snapping. It's not special if you do it every week. Look, if Dynamite is supposed to be 2 hours, stick to that damn schedule. It's like my buddy from college who thought writing 20 pages instead of the assigned 10 would impress the professor. Spoiler alert, it got him a one-way ticket to Fail Town. Now, let's get to the placement of matches, which was about as sensible as a screen door on a submarine. Why the hell wasn't Adam Copeland versus Jon Moxley the main event? They're headlining the pay-per-view, for crying out loud. Instead, we have Copeland wrestling Wheeler Yuta at 9 p.m. Wheeler? Really? The guy who loses more often than a gambling addict in Vegas? That's like putting a toddler in a boxing ring and expecting a championship fight. And Jon Moxley, hyping up the Revolution World title match backstage while screaming at the camera instead of getting that crowd interaction? It's a missed opportunity. The crowd's energy is the lifeblood of wrestling, and they're just letting it slip away like water through a sieve. Instead of closing the show with a heavyweight showdown, we get a tag match that feels more like an afterthought than a proper main event. You got two guys fighting over a secondary title, while the real action gets shoved aside like last week's leftovers. It's downright criminal. If you've got wrestlers that are going to have a pay-per-view heavyweight championship match lined up, those people should be front and center, not buried in the middle of the card. Now, let's sprinkle in some positive, because believe it or not, they do exist. Ricochet and Swerve Strickland are clearly stars in the making. They know how to get a crowd invested, recap their stories with intensity, and bring characters to life. It's a goddamn shame they're not squaring off against each other for the AEW championship, because those two deserve the spotlight, not just a moment here and there. And that 8-man match featuring Powerhouse Hobbs? Sure, he got a nice showcase, but the ending felt like a bad rerun of a soap opera. Don Callis and his crew beating down Will Ospreay? Yawn. It's the same old song and dance, and it's getting old fast. In the end, this show's glaring weaknesses and poor formatting did nothing to hype up Revolution properly. It was really Swerve and Ricochet who brought any attention to the broadcast. And shame on Copeland and Moxley for not advocating for their main event spot. They've both been around the block with WWE. Well, they know damn well that if you're fighting for the world title, you better be in the spotlight on the go-home show. So, without further ado, let's dive headfirst into the chaotic mess that was AEW Dynamite on March 5th. It's going to be a wild ride, folks, and I hope you've got your crash helmets on. It was announced earlier today on social media that Brody King is going to face Okada for his Continental Championship. I'm really excited for this match because Brody King is a big body person, while Okada is very athletic and has the ability to lift and throw larger opponents. This makes for a great clash of styles. However, they need to stop announcing championship matches and pay-per-view matches on social media. Why not announce that on your television programming? It feels like a bad format. The show opens with Ricochet and Swerve Strickland doing contract signings. Ricochet ribs Swerve and Prince Nana. I appreciate that Ricochet mentioned how their feud started, with toilet paper being thrown at him by Swerve at AEW World End. Ricochet talks about his goal of wanting to be a champion and his motivation for wanting people to take him seriously. I really feel that he is trying hard to be a character, tell stories, and garner attention in professional wrestling. This effort is essential, as match after match with no stakes leads to a lack of engagement. Great matches and great stories make great professional wrestling. I also like Ricochet making a joke about Tony Khan because he had issues with his microphone. Honestly, it's embarrassing that the company has audio problems, but since he's a villain, he has every right to make it work. Ricochet also mentions he's focused on Moxley and Copeland, the two competing for the World Heavyweight title. Since Ricochet and Swerve are vying for a #1 contender spot, with the winner at AEW Revolution facing whoever is champion after, it's great that Ricochet mentions these other wrestlers. It puts potential future feuds in people's minds, effectively hyping up what's to come. Swerve Strickland responds by calling Ricochet an entitled and annoying little prick. He continues, saying waking up the most dangerous man in AEW is a mistake Ricochet will regret. Strickland finishes by saying people remember Ricochet for the fact that he revived his career briefly, and also revived his ring announcer wife. I'm extremely interested in this match, because both did a great job conveying emotion and frustration over not being champions. Ricochet seeks validation and respect, while Strickland wants to reclaim a title he lost last August and end a losing streak. Honestly, I'm sad that Swerve lost his title at AEW All in last August. Imagine how engaging it would be if they fought over the world title. This rivalry is far more captivating than what Moxley and Copeland are presenting, which is disappointing given their impressive accolades. Swerve is a one-time AEW heavyweight champion, and Ricochet has never held that title. Yet they are doing a better job than both Moxley and Copeland. The next match features an 8-man tag team bout. Will Ospreay, Mark Briscoe, Powerhouse Hobbs, and Orange Cassidy against Brian Keith, Brian Cage, Mark Davis, and Lance Archer. I appreciated the crane camera panning over the audience when Ospreay came to the ring. 2,800 people is a solid draw, especially compared to AEW shows usually with 1,500 people. I'm not a fan of 8-man matches because they often become chaotic and hard to follow, but there were a bunch of moves I liked. Ospreay executed a head scissor on Cage, and Briscoe hit an Enzwich Gyri on Cage. Cage then grabbed Orange Cassidy and delivered a vertical suplex, landing him onto his knee. The announcers misidentified Lance Archer as Mark Davis a couple times, which was unprofessional. The commentary team needs to get names right to maintain credibility. Don Callis sneaking in punches on Cassidy, while the referee wasn't looking has become cliche. Brian Cage and Mark Davis executed a double-team, delayed vertical suplex on Cassidy, and Orange Cassidy countered with a stun dog millionaire on Mark Davis. Powerhouse Hobbs performed a series of double-team moves with his teammates, and Mark Davis hit a devastating powerbomb on Hobbs, which I thought was the move of the night. Hobbs retaliated with Buster on Davis, and Brian Keith executed a top rope avalanche exploder on Cassidy. Will Ospreay secured the victory with a hidden blade on Brian Keith. I wasn't satisfied with the match because the chaos made it hard to follow, and I ended up just noting the moves I liked. Ospreay is very over, so it would have made sense for Hobbs to get the pinfall here. The issue is that Brian Keith loses frequently, and Ospreay often prevails against members of the Don Callis family, making their encounters predictable. The post-match beatdown on Will Ospreay was effective in setting up Kyle Fletcher versus Ospreay in a steel cage match at Revolution, though I felt it dragged out a bit too long. At 9 p.m., we had Wheeler Yuta versus Adam Copeland. I stopped watching the match because it felt like complete nonsense to me. Wheeler looks like an Amish person who hasn't eaten in months, with his bad hair and skinny body. Copeland wrestled as if he took classes from Ospreay, doing flips, grappling moves, and shoulder tackles. It felt like he abandoned his brawling style. It would have made more sense for him to face Claudio Castagnoli, as he's also part of Moxley's faction and a former Ring of Honor champion. Claudio is exceptionally strong and could deliver a believable big swing, making the match more compelling. Alternatively, Pac would have been a good fit, given his reputation for being a violent wrestler. Wheeler comes off more like a developmental wrestler that most people don't know about. One thing I appreciated was at the end, when Copeland told Wheeler that a handshake signifies respect. This hints that Moxley doesn't respect Wheeler, creating necessary friction within the faction. The Moxley group lacks weaknesses, and introducing this dynamic could lead to Moxley losing the title and the faction disbanding at Revolution, which many fans want to see. This unpredictability is valuable and adds depth to the storyline. Another downside was Moxley speaking to the camera backstage to hype his match with Copeland. This should have occurred in the ring to garner a reaction from the crowd, as hearing the audience would have been more effective. This match should have headlined the show, given the importance of the world title. After this, we saw a montage from the Outrunners, featuring a workout video inspired by the 1980s with a vintage look. It would have been great if they played it over the crowd reactions to showcase how much the fans support the Outrunners. They could be one of the tag teams to watch this year. It's unfortunate that Bobby Lashley, MVP, and Shelton Benjamin weren't at the show to respond to this video, as they are very over with the audience. Wouldn't you want them on your go-home show, hyping up their tag team championship match? This lack of star power contributes to the bad formatting and flow of the show, making it feel disjointed and jarring, almost like a sketch comedy show. It loses emotional investment. AEW also has issues with not drafting the right wrestlers to the show. Big stars need to hype up their matches, and it needs to be all hands on deck. Backstage, Renee Moxley, who Jim Cornette hilariously calls good, is talking to MJF outside. It's jarring as hell because the show airs at 9 p.m. Eastern, but outside in Sacramento, it looks like it's Wednesday afternoon. They really need to get their shit together with that. It just looks off-putting as fuck. MJF and Renee quickly step aside as Adam Page rolls up in his goddamn vehicle decked out with longhorns. Max makes a run for it, and Adam chases after him like a bat out of hell. In a twist, Adam ends up beating the shit out of some poor bastard backstage, dragging him to the ring area. The crowd and Adam soon realize this guy is dressed up like MJF and was hired by him for this ridiculous setup. That's when the real MJF blindsides Adam Page, and they start brawling ringside before spilling into the ring. Eventually, MJF gains the upper hand and sprays lighter fluid on Page. But just when it looks like he's about to set him ablaze, over 20 people, mostly security and a few referees, rush in to stop him. The whole scene is so cartoonish. It reminded me of those moments in The Simpsons where Homer gets dragged away by a mob. Not what they intended. But damn if it didn't look funny as hell. With John Cena stealing the spotlight lately. I thought lighting Paige on fire would have been a bold move, showing they can take things to a more violent, edgy level like WWE does. I'm hoping for a rematch at Dynasty with a hardcore stipulation. Let's make it brutal. Then there's a graphic announcing Harley Cameron's appearance on Collision. I can't help but think, imagine if you had her at Revolution. She's been busting her ass to become a new star, yet it's clear they don't have long-term plans for her, which is just fucking ridiculous. Next up is a tag match with Thunder Rosa and Chris Statlander versus Megan Bayne and Penelope Ford. Honestly, nothing happens except Megan Bayne squashing both opponents like they're fucking nothing. After that, we've got Max Caster's open challenge, and he gets buried by Jay White again. This humiliation is becoming repetitive as hell. I've said it before, Caster needs a winning streak, leading to a showdown with Anthony Bowens, who could become a major babyface. It's fucking frustrating to see them waste talent like this. And for Christ's sake, why isn't Harley Cameron advertised for a match at Revolution? She's been working her ass off, and it's egregious that she's not getting her shot. The next segment features Maria and Toni Storm. But what's striking is that Renee is doing the backstage interview just like she did with MJF. Viewers might think she's running around like a chicken with its head cut off, even though it's clear it's edited. This just doesn't look professional. WWE has multiple announcers backstage, which makes it feel realistic. The main event featured Brody King and Strickland versus Okada and Ricochet. Brody and Strickland have some serious chemistry and could definitely be a successful tag team. They do some great double team moves, and AEW should explore this direction. Unfortunately, I decided not to watch the rest of the match past 10:05 because I'm sick and tired of these damn overruns. They're disrespectful as hell to people who work nights. If you keep doing overruns, they lose their impact. It's like someone's closing the door to leave, but a kid keeps asking questions and you gotta bark, "It's over." I implore everyone to push the show to start ending at 10 p.m. They've been overdoing this shit, and it's all about format. It sends a message that they can't manage their time correctly. Overall, Powerhouse Hobbs, Strickland, and Ricochet saved the show. The main event match was excellent, but the show has major flaws. I urge them to think about their programming like a movie, where everything must flow together and make sense. They need to reposition matches to ensure they're in the right spots. You can't have wrestlers fighting for a world heavyweight championship with poor presentation and placement. And let's face it, Powerhouse Hobbs and Harley Cameron aren't on the AEW Revolution card when they've been getting over. People are invested in them as new talent this year, and if they don't push these stars, it's going to hurt AEW. We've seen what happens when talent jumps to WWE and becomes big stars. Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania main event, Ricky Starks getting a push in NXT, and Jade Cargill appearing at multiple WrestleManias. It's fucking concerning. Also, AI tools like ChatGPT can help AEW restructure their show and make it flow better. And I'll say this, Ricochet and Swerve starting and ending the night is great continuity. It gives the audience something to look forward to, just like how WWE builds anticipation for the main event in the opening segment. MJF was right. He checked out the Elimination Chamber this weekend and saw John Cena turn, and that was fucking awesome. MJF may be in AEW, but he's smart enough to watch WWE and learn what they do right. Tony Khan needs to do the same to understand how to format a wrestling show better. Otherwise, it's going to feel like a chaotic mess of random skits and music video clips. Yes, the shows are getting better. The wrestlers are stepping up, taking it seriously, but there are still weaknesses that need addressing. Formatting is the big dragon AEW needs to slay, or else it's going to be a clusterfuck.